Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 25th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, presented by AAA. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and we've got a jam-packed episode. Two great guests, and as always, great analysis from our friend Ben Fennell. But before we get to Ben, we've got Pick 6, where we've got the debut of our brand new segment here with Greg Cosell. I'm going to sit down with Greg. We're going to go through 6 players that he has studied over the last couple of weeks and how they best transition to the NFL. You know how much I value Greg's opinion when it comes to not just the X's and O's, but also watching these college players and trying to project how they make that transition. We're going to talk through that with Greg, and it's going to be a weekly segment here on the show. Hope you guys enjoy what we've got coming your way in Pick 6. After that, Ben Fennell and I in Draft Buzz, we're going to go through another mock draft. This time, it's our buddy Dane Brugler's latest mock draft, which just dropped this morning, Thursday, hot off the presses, and it's got a bunch of trades, a bunch of fun picks. So Ben and I will break it all down. Which picks stood out most to us, which ones shocked us, which ones were a little bit outside the box. We'll cover all of that in Draft Buzz. Then we've got another segment here, new one we haven't run in a couple years, and it's called Unofficial Visit. Basically what I'm going to try and do, since I didn't get the same kind of access to these players that we usually get at the Shrine Bowl and at the Senior Bowl and even at the Combine, I'm going to try and see if I can set up some of these interviews, and I'm only going to be able to get a couple over the course of draft season, but this week, I'm happy to welcome onto the show potential first-round corner, UCF's Aaron Robinson. We're going to talk about just his skill set, some of his teammates, some of the toughest players he has faced, not just during his career at UCF, but also even at the Senior Bowl. So we'll talk through that entire process with him. Excited to welcome Aaron to the show. Like I said, I'm going to try and get a couple of those guys over the course of the pre-draft process. I don't know if it'll be a weekly thing, but we'll try and mix them in as we get them. And we'll wrap things up on the show with our draft mailbag, where I'll take a couple of questions from you at home. Before we get things started, I wanted to remind you once again about jumping on to our Apple Podcast page and leaving a rating, leaving a comment. I know you guys have got questions. We're starting to get some, into some segments where we're stacking position players together, trying to replicate what teams are doing over the next few months. If you got questions about players, position groups, a mock draft, anything, head on over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. We will answer it. If you've got a question, we'll answer it here on the podcast. That being said, let's get this show rolling. Let's start things off with Greg Cosell in Pick 6.
Now it's time for Pick 6.
Well, excited to welcome back here to the Journey to the Draft podcast, my friend Greg Cosell. Greg, welcome back to the show. First time here in 2021.
I know, Fran. Unfortunately, our Eagles season ended a little early, but we're on to the draft. Can you believe it?
We are. I can believe it.
It's a little crazy. I know you've been grinding away watching college players. I've started doing that, and it's that time of year.
Well, that's why you are going to join us now on a weekly basis. And in this segment, Pick 6, I'm going to pick 6 guys each week that we'll kind of cover, and I will try and keep it thematic. So today, we're going to cover a couple of running backs that I feel are kind of seen as close together. And that's kind of what I want to do, is take 2 guys that are kind of in the same tier, break them down, talk about how they transition, and we can talk about the similarities between the two, and also some guys that you've watched at the same position that maybe people should be talking about more. And I want to start at the running back spot. And the first player I want to hit on is one of everybody's favorite players, and that's Clemson running back Travis Etienne. I know you've had a chance to study him, not just this year, but I think going back to last year as well. So I'm excited to kind of get your idea of how you feel he best transitions to the NFL.
He's going to be an interesting transition, Fran, for this reason. He was never a volume back in college. We know that he brings explosive traits to the party. That always projects well to the league. We know that. I mean, he's a home run hitter. Yep. He can take it to the house on any play. He's got short area burst. He's got long speed. That's always in demand. I thought this year in 2020, because I watched him in 2019 as well, I thought this year he was much improved in his ability to gain the hard yards inside. I thought he showed some better contact balance, some better finishing traits. It made me think, quite honestly, of Dalvin Cook. I think stylistically they're similar, but Cook was a foundation back at Florida State. He's been a foundation back in the NFL. Etienne has never been a true foundation back in terms of volume of carries. So while the skill set is absolutely there, I think teams have to decide, what is he? Do they think of him like a Cook and hope he can be that guy if you draft him, let's say in the top 20? Or do you think of him more in the Alvin Kamara category? Maybe 175, 180 carries as a receiver. We saw him detached from the formation. He's a very good receiver. He's improved in that area.
Yep.
So the question is, the traits are there because of the explosiveness. And that's, as I said, and this, always in demand. The question is, how will he be seen by teams as they, go through their draft discussions?
Yeah, I agree with you that he definitely ran harder this year, and I thought his ability to kind of create his own yardage really improved going from 2019 to 2020, and that was a big sticking point for me overall in the evaluation. Was I didn't know if he had that ability to consistently make that first man miss. He's kind of a long, like upright runner. He's not a shake you in the hole kind of consistent, wiggle to in a phone booth to make that first man miss. And he's not a power runner either by that, in terms of how we think of those guys. So in terms of being able to create his own yards, I had some of those questions. And I do feel at the end of the day, his best runs draw, counter, get him going downhill in a very defined kind of, here's your aiming point, go. And I feel like that's where he's at his best, especially if you're able to get him up to out in space in the second level.
Yeah, and it's funny you say what you said about some of the things that concern you, because I made a note that I thought he was a little straight line linear. I thought that he had some stiffness in his hips and his core. I wouldn't call him naturally shifty and elusive.
Right.
To me, he was much more kind of a velocity runner than a laterally agile, make you miss runner. His feet were always churning and he's explosive, but, he wasn't one of those make you miss at the second and third level kind of runners. So to me, when all's said and done, it's how is he seen by teams? There's no question he'll be drafted, I would think, in the first round, simply because of the explosiveness and the fact that he's a receiver as well. Yeah. Now, he's not great in pass protection, and I think that's an area he needs work, but you can kind of fudge that a little bit with your protection schemes. We know that. You can do that in the NFL. And the fact that he is a receiver, I think he had a 42-yarder that I remember seeing this year where he was detached from the formation, where he ran a double move. So he's a runner receiver with explosive traits that normally plays well in the NFL.
How do you feel about like a Jamal Charles in terms of comparing him to Jamal coming out? Is he a guy that you feel had a similar kind of skill set?
Yeah, I think Etienne is a little stockier and stouter in his build than Charles. Charles was kind of sinewy and lithe in his build. But I guess you could argue that the way they transition would be similar. And I think that's the big question, is how he transitions. Yep. Do people try to make him a foundation back, a running back one, so to speak, where he lines up and he's an 18 to 20 carry a week back? To be honest, I don't know the answer to that. He did not do that in college.
So I want to ask you about another player that is also seen in first round mock drafts at times, and that's Alabama running back Najee Harris.
Yeah.
Different kind of build for sure for Etienne. How do you view Najee Harris projecting to the NFL? I find him a fascinating study.
Me too. And it's funny, I watched him last summer from 2019, and truth be told, I did not like him very much. I thought this year there was significant improvement, meaningful improvement in terms of lateral quickness. I thought his hips were looser. I thought he showed much better running traits than he did in 2019, when I thought he was just kind of a big back who ran hard but didn't have a whole lot of looseness to him. Now, I still think he runs a bit upright. He takes body shots. He takes a lot of contact during the game. While he was looser, I still think there's some stiffness to him. He's not necessarily a true make-you-miss runner, but the more I watched him, Fran, the more I kind of liked him. I mean, he's a good back. I think he'll be seen as a true feature back. The question I have is, will he be seen as a 3-down back? He's a good receiver. Will people see him as a guy you keep on the field on 3rd and 9?
Yep.
He's got good hands. He made some tough catches. He ran multiple route concepts in college and was effective. So will teams see him as a 3-down back? That could impact where he's drafted.
A better blocker, I think, than Etienne at this point.
Yes. Yep.
And to me, the interesting part, to your point, like I watched him over the summer, and a name I wrote down, and I wasn't saying this in a bad way, but I wrote down James Conner, and that's
Right.
kind of just in terms of stylistically, that's kind of how I saw him. And to your point, this year, you just watch the highlight, just watching them on TV on a weekly basis. I mean, his feet just looked lighter. He moved so much smoother this year. I'm excited to kind of complete my study on him, but it looked like much more of a complete, at an ideal 3-down back in that kind of sense of the word. But it's going to be interesting just to see how these two guys, Etienne and Harris, are kind of evaluated. I think for most people, they would say that those are the two top backs.
Yeah. Just a final point about Harris before we jump into another back that I really liked. Harris is not a home run hitter. So I think even though that you could look at him and say, even if you think he's a 3-down back, he's not a home run hitter. He's kind of your classic sustaining grinder, gets hard yards, but he's a contact runner in many ways. And I always wonder about that. I know he's 230 pounds. He looked lighter this year, but I guess that's what he weighed. Somewhere along the line, I saw that he weighed 230. So I think that's what he is. But he just looked like he was built differently this year. And to your point, I made the note that he looked quicker with lighter feet. You made the same point. And he kind of grew on me. I've seen people make comparisons to Matt Forte. I thought Matt Forte was just a smoother moving athlete overall. I don't see Harris as truly smooth. I mean, there are times that he looked a little more like that this year than certainly in 2019, but I don't quite see that comparison.
Is he smooth or is he big back smooth? Like it's like, oh man,
no, it's a great point.
For his size, he's smooth, but he's not. That's right. Kind of, I view it the same way.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. You know, I guess if you're comparing him to 225, 230 pound backs, maybe yes, but I think if you're just talking smooth overall, I don't think he quite fits that category.
So you've been grinding through guys, really on a daily and nightly basis over the course of the last few weeks. I want to ask you, is there a running back that you've studied over that time span that you're like, man, like I haven't seen a lot written about this guy or a lot talked about this guy, but he really, really stood out to you?
Well, yeah, there is. And I didn't see 1 second of him on TV this year. So I put him on simply because I saw him on a list, as that's kind of the way I work. And I actually love it when a guy is virgin territory for me because I have no preconceived notion whatsoever. And that's Javonte Williams from North Carolina. I loved his tape. I think you could make an argument, and I'm not quite there yet. I just finished Harris before we started this. So I have to sort of collate all in my head, how I feel about these guys. And you know me, I don't necessarily love to make lists. But I think you couldn't make an argument that Williams is a better runner than Harris.
I think you could too.
Yeah, I thought he had size. He has a compact build, patience, vision, subtle lateral quickness and confined space, burst, speed, power, contact balance, physicality, finishing toughness and competitiveness. I really like Javonte Williams' tape. I thought that he's definitely can be a running back one at the NFL level where he's your guy.
Yeah, to me, you just checked so many boxes and you went through that whole list. The power, the vision, the balance, the body control, really, really impressive. His ability to make that first man miss. He's good on third down, good in pass pro. I was a big fan watching his film as well. So I was glad to hear
I really liked him. We'll see. Again, we don't know. So running backs, and again, you get into that argument again, Fran, of the value of running backs, and that's an argument you could have forever. There are people who believe that you should never draft a running back in the first round. Again, I guess to me, if you do a draft board, and that's what teams do. I don't necessarily do a draft board. I don't know if you do. But I think if you do a draft board and you are rating players, based on your scouting staff, your GM, whoever does all that work, and teams spend a lot of time and resources doing this, if you have Travis Etienne rated as the 12th best player on your board, and let's say you have the 17th pick in the draft and he's sitting there, do you say, well, I can't take Travis Etienne because he's a running back? Is that the approach you want to take? I don't know. I guess to me that seems a little silly, but I know there's a lot of people who believe that, people who you and I would view as smart and reasonable people. But I guess it depends on your offense. Travis Etienne is an example of a guy that can score on any play. Usually those guys are in demand no matter what position they play.
No doubt. I think that the way that you want to play offense, if you are the Tennessee Titans and you don't have Derrick Henry, you're not just finding Derrick Henry on on the weekly yard sale on somebody's front lawn. You've got to be able to go and find that guy.
Right. I mean, so it depends on what your approach is. If you truly, I guess the point is, if you have Derrick Henry and he's there already, and Mike Vrabel comes in, does he say, okay, here's who we have, so this is the way we're going to play? If you don't have Derrick Henry or a back along those lines, and there's not many of those guys, do you say, okay, we're not going to play that way? That's not the way to win in the NFL, so we're not going to go after a back like that. Right. And that gets to the Najee Harris discussion as to what he is in the league. I mean, he certainly looks like the kind of guy you could give the ball to 20 times a game. He's 230 pounds. He's powerful. He's physical. He's competitive. He gets hard yards. He looks like that guy. So is that guy of value in the NFL, or do you not want to run your offense that way?
Yeah, it's the running back conversation, always a fun one to have, and I'm sure we'll be having it over the next few weeks as well. Let's get to three more players that I wanted to hit on, and we're going to go now to the offensive tackle position. And I picked two guys that I feel are kind of in that same bucket, in the same range. And so I wanted to ask you first about Texas left tackle Sam Cosmi. I know that you've studied him. You studied Sam Ehlinger, some other players on that Texas offense. Tell us what you saw from Cosmi and how you feel he projects to the league.
Yeah, he was a guy that I had to keep watching because, when I initially started watching him, and I think I watched 5 full games.
Okay.
So complete games. So it wasn't just, let's watch pass, let's watch run. I watched 5 complete games of Samuel Cosmi. Another guy I knew nothing about other than seeing him on a list. I did get from a scouting friend of mine his measurables because, they do that. So to me, he was much more overall of a finesse player than a power player, but he wasn't a weakling, so to speak. But I thought he had plus athleticism and movement traits. Think he needs to get a little stronger, but I will say this, even though I think he needs to get stronger, he didn't get overrun by speed to power or the bull rush very often, but there wasn't really, to me, a physical presence to his play. He didn't come across to me as powerful. And again, I think he needs to be taught a number of things, because the vertical set was not really part of what he did. And I think the kick slide and the vertical set is something he probably needs to be taught. But I think he's got tools. He's got traits. I think he'll be a quality starting offensive tackle in the NFL at some point.
Yeah, that's honestly, like, watching him, I agree with a lot of what you said. You don't see a power player. You see a guy that still needs work with his hands and with the timing of his sets. But at the end of the day, like, you watch him, you're like, all right, in terms of just the sum of his parts, I think he's a starting tackle. And you look around the league, and I think there are a lot of players that you're like, yeah, I'm not really wowed with this guy, but he's been a starting tackle in the league for multiple years. And that, honestly, the comp I landed on was another player I felt kind of similarly about, and that was Taylor Decker when he came out of Ohio State. And I think that he and Cosmi are very, very similar, and Decker's been a starter for Detroit for a handful of years now, really, since he came into the league.
Well, I think the one thing that stands out is the athletic traits.
Yep.
Now, I think he needs some work. As I said, he was not a vertical setter. That can be taught. And one thing I've learned, and you and I both know Duke Manyweather, pretty well, who's an offensive line guru and one of the best out there. And so what I try to do when I watch guys is I try to get a sense in my mind, and believe me, I don't fancy myself an offensive line expert, but I've learned from a lot of people. So I try to apply that learning when I watch.
Sure.
I think you try to figure out what can be taught, what can be coached. And most things can be. And I think you hit on a few things. Well, besides the vertical set, which I mentioned, you talked about the hand usage. I thought that he was a little late at times with his hands. Guys got into him, and he's not a power guy. So I think, that's something that can be taught and coached. But when you see that kind of pure athletic movement, I think coaches get excited. They can work with that. So to me, he's a tackle, and you can't, we so get caught up, all of us, in the idea that, if a guy's not great at tackle, then he's a guard. Well, you still have to line up with 64 tackles every week in the NFL. And not everyone is going to be a sweet looking athlete with cool feet. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So, this thing about, everybody's a guard because they don't look pretty at tackle, there's not 100 Joe Thomases.
I mean, I'm just looking at a list. I mean, you look at like Bobby Massey, who started a bunch of games. Brian, Big V, Halapulavati Vaitai. Jack Conklin doesn't always look pretty. Marcus Cannon in New England. Orlando Brown. Sam Tevy for the Chargers has started a bunch of games. Kelvin Beachum for years and years has started in the NFL. Charles Leno out in Chicago. I mean, there's all kinds of guys that you're looking at. You're like, doesn't look the way that you would try to. It's not right out of central casting for the left tackle position, but the guy's played a lot of football.
Let's throw out a name here. Before we get to another name I know you wanted to mention, let me throw out another game. You just threw out Jack Conklin, okay?
Sure.
Now, Jack Conklin, again, I was caught up when he came out of Michigan State. I thought he was better suited to play guard, but he got drafted in the top 10 because it became team and scheme specific. He was drafted by Tennessee when Mike Mularkey was the head coach, I believe. They were going to run the football. So he played tackle. Okay. He did a nice job for a couple of years. They ran the ball. They have Derrick Henry. Then he got, now he's with Cleveland. Same concept. Their foundational approach is the run game. Okay. Obviously they throw it, but the run game is the foundational approach. There was a player I watched on tape, and I watched him recently, so he's fresh in my mind, who I kind of liked a lot. And I thought of him in a similar way to Jack Conklin, and that's Jackson Carman from Clemson. And I don't know if you've done him yet.
Sure, I have.
You have?
I have, yep.
Yeah. Now, he's not a sweet athlete by any stretch, okay? But I think a lot of people will look at him and say, oh, he's a guard. Now, maybe he is. I'm not saying he is or he isn't, but I'm just saying that it's so easy to say that. I think that's a cop-out at times, because you look at Jackson Carman, and I think he's a tackle personally, by the way, but you can look at him and go, wow, he's not super light on his feet. He doesn't seem to have really loose, smooth hips. But you know what? He didn't get beat very much in pass protection. I thought he did overall a pretty solid job in pass pro. He's a physical, tenacious, competitive run blocker. As you know, you studied him. And, it's easy to look at a guy like that and say he's a guard. But you know what? You got to line people up at tackle too.
Right. It's always a fun conversation for sure when you're talking about, especially with people that know the game or know the position more than you and I do in terms of, what works and what traits matter most. And, there are plenty of guys like that playing a lot of quality football, a lot of snaps in the league on a weekly basis.
Let's just go back real quick. The player you're familiar with because he was in Philadelphia. Dennis Kelly's been the starter at right tackle for the last 2 years for the Tennessee Titans. And you know what? He's done a pretty solid job because of the way they play offense. Dennis Kelly, probably you don't want him as your right tackle if you're going to run a Mike Martz offense with deep drops, 5 out, and you're asking your tackles to block one-on-one on an island when your quarterback is going to hold the ball for 2.6, 2.8 seconds. But if you're not going to do that, and not that many teams in today's NFL do that, Fran, as you know.
Right.
So, it's always easy to say a guy should be a guard or a guy isn't a starter, but the league is not like that.
No question. So let me ask you about another tackle that I've done, and we've talked about a decent amount on this show over the last couple of months. I know I'm a fan. Ben Fennell's a fan. Liam Eichenberg from Notre Dame. I'd love to ask you about Eichenberg and how you view his transition to the NFL.
I liked him. I watched 6 full games. I thought he was a strong prospect. I think he's a solid starting left tackle early in his career. He was so consistent with his efficiency of execution, both as a run blocker and a pass protector. I think he's a little more finesse than power, but I thought he did generate movement and leverage as a run blocker. I thought his fundamentals, again, based on people I've spoken to through many years of doing this, I thought his fundamentals were really clean as far as his footwork, his balance, his hand usage. He was just smoothly efficient. Again, you can get caught up. Is he a great athlete, like a high-level athlete? Probably not. He just, to me, was so methodical and measured and fundamentally sound. And I just really liked his tape quite a bit.
Yeah, there were a lot of times watching him. I'm like, this is what a starting tackle looks like in the NFL. This is what a solid starting tackle looks like. And I felt that way a lot while watching Liam Eichenberg. So with that in mind, how do you kind of compare those two? Are there kind of similarities between Cosme and Eichenberg, or how do you see the differences between those two players?
I guess I would say this. I think that Cosme's athleticism ceiling is higher, but Eichenberg is a better player now.
Got it.
Much more efficient in his fundamental execution. So now I guess it comes down to how an offensive line coach would see it, how a team would see it. You might look at Cosme and say, okay, he might have some issues because we've got to coach him up on some things, but maybe a year or 2 or 3 down the road, because he's, I think, a little more purely athletic than Eichenberg, you might think, hey, Cosme can be that guy. Whereas I think Eichenberg, he can step right in and start for you, and you're fine. And he'll be a really solid NFL left tackle. I don't get caught up in, he's an all-pro, he's a this and that. You can line Eichenberg up now, and he can start for you at tackle.
So I'm going to ask you the same question for these guys that I asked you for the running backs. Is there an offensive tackle, namely a left tackle, that you've studied over the last couple of weeks that has kind of caught your eye and like, I didn't know much about this guy, but he really, really impressed me on film?
Well, I knew a lot about this guy, and I've watched so much of him because of who he played for that I really like him, and that's Alex Leatherwood.
Got it.
I think Leatherwood, to me, and again, he played guard 2 years ago. He's played tackle the last 2 years since Jonah Williams left. He's played left tackle. I guarantee there'll be some people who are going to give you he's a guard. To me, he's a tackle. He's 6'5". He's over 310. He's got long arms. I think presents a desirable combination of size and mass, far more than functional movement that can be developed further. Is he an elite athlete like a Laramie Tunsil? No, but I think he possesses enough movement. He's strong. He's a really powerful run blocker. I thought he had a very comfortable vertical pass set because they did a lot of that at Alabama. I thought his hands were always ready to strike. Was he beaten, to the edge sometimes? Yes, he was, because he's a little stiff. Sometimes he would open his hips. Again, I think all these things can be dealt with, but he's a player that, I think, and we know he was a big time recruit. I think he came out of Florida, the state of Florida. He was a big time recruit, and I really think he's going to be a good player.
Yeah, he's a guy that we've talked about a lot. And, I think when you talk about that, have that conversation about, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? He's exactly the kind of player that you're talking about, because not everybody is going to view him, this guy's a pure franchise left tackle. But at the end of the day, as you said, he's played a ton of football and winning football.
At a left tackle.
Really good team, by the way.
Yeah, played the last 2 years at left tackle. I remember watching the Georgia game this year, and I don't know if you watched that game because of their pass rush, who I haven't gotten to yet, but I watched the game from Alabama's perspective. I just, I wasn't studying I'll get to the Georgia pass rusher as a separate player, but I just took note of Leatherwood snaps against the pass rusher because I knew who he was. He did fine. He had no problems at all with the Georgia pass rusher. To me, Leatherwood can play left tackle in the NFL. Now, whether I'm sure there'll be people who disagree, and that's okay. But again, like I said, there's 64 starting tackles in the NFL, and I think Leatherwood's going to be one of them.
Well, Greg, we've covered 6 players here this week: Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Sam Cosme, Liam Eichenberg, Alex Leatherwood. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. We'll be back later next week. We'll talk about 6 more guys.
Thanks, Fran.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, hope you guys enjoyed that conversation with Greg. Let's now move into our mock draft roundup here in Draft Buzz as I welcome in Ben Fennell. Ben, we're going to break down and kind of rip apart our friend Dane Brugler's latest mock draft, which went live on The Athletic earlier today, Thursday. Excited to kind of rip into this with you.
Yeah, I know Dane. He's been known to do some draft coverage here and there. Interested to see what he's been doing, for the past couple of months, and to see if this mock's going to be correct or not.
Yeah, we don't have a feeling on any of his thoughts on prospects at all. So excited to get just a new voice here on the show. No, we always love going into Dane's mock drafts, and once we knew that he was putting a new one out, we said, all right, we got to break this one down for the podcast this week. And let's start things off with our favorite pick of the draft. I will let you kick things off. What was your favorite pick in Dane's round 1 mock?
Well, I'm going to slide all the way down here to the 18th overall pick, which initially was the Miami Dolphins. He had a trade here with the Pittsburgh Steelers that I absolutely love. And he plugged in Virginia Tech big left tackle Christian Darrisaw to be the future left tackle of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Darrisaw is a type of tackle that won't be for every scheme. Bit of a vertical displacement guy, more of a mauler, not necessarily one to be used in space. And that's how Pittsburgh likes their offensive linemen, more the bigger types, the burly types, the vertical displacement types. And I just can see that style of player, that ACC tackle in some bad weather games, fitting in perfectly with that AFC North.
Yeah, I think that's a great fit. When you look at the way that Darrisaw plays, you're like, yeah, that is that kind of style. And people might say like, oh, that's kind of cherry picking. No, like that's a real thing. You watch a guy, and if you can visualize him being a Steeler, you can visualize him being a Raven, like that. Guess what? That there's a reason for that, and I think that certainly is something that
it was the one I kind of went up and down. It was like, that's a great fit right there. Yep. You just kind of visualize that, you feel it. And then when you pull back the curtain a little bit more, that they're going to need a tackle with Andre Villanueva hitting free agency, as Dane details, you just kind of see that fit and that style of tackle fitting for that scheme.
So you went with the 18th pick. I went with the 16th pick. My favorite was Azeez Ojulari, the pass rusher from Georgia, going to the Arizona Cardinals. And they've got Chandler Jones. He is coming off of an injury and is entering a contract year, as Dane alluded to. And Hassan Reddick is about to hit the free agent market. So they're going to need some pass rush help off the edge regardless. And obviously Ojulari, I waxed poetic about him earlier this week. I'm a big fan of him. I know you're a big fan. I know Dane's a big fan. Seeing him go as the first pass rusher, or one of the first pass rushers off the board, makes a lot of sense. And I love the fit there in Arizona in a 3-4 scheme. A guy that certainly can be present moving forward, getting after the quarterback, but can also set the edge and drop back in coverage. And remember, Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator there, he was in Denver when they already had Von Miller and they drafted Bradley Chubb. He's all for getting as much talent off the edge as possible. So you get Chandler Jones, you get Azeez Ojulari. That's you're rolling with those two guys coming off both edges.
They're going to need some more cornerstone pieces on the defensive side of the ball for the next couple of years. They're going to have a huge turnover this year, as you already alluded to, Hassan Reddick, but other guys, Patrick Peterson, Drake Kirkpatrick, Devondre Campbell, Corey Peters, a lot of free agents. And it seems like they're going to kind of hit a new era on that defensive side of the ball. We paid Budda Baker. We love him. I think Jordan Hicks is going to be a nice player. Yep. Byron Murphy, nice player.
Yep.
Who else are we adding to the fire to be a future stud and a pillar of the defense? I think that would be a great pick, and learn some from Chandler Jones before he gets out of there.
Yeah, and obviously you're hoping for the next step from Isaiah Simmons as well. I mean, they've got some pieces on the back seven. Now it's trying to add some more teeth to that rush. Both of us picked two players that went outside the top 10 here, but I want to start with the next question here. The pick outside the top 10 that made the most sense to us. We're like, yeah, you know what? I could see that, and I could see what the reasoning is behind that we like the fit. I'll let you go first here. We've already hit on two of these, but let's go over two more.
And as I peep down the rundown here, I think we're going to have a similar style of picks here, and I'm glad we didn't pick the same player. But I'm going to go with Micah Parsons to the New England Patriots. Kind of a consensus top 10 pick. Seems to be sliding to the middle of the first round now, as some of the tackles, receivers, quarterbacks are getting pushed up. But Micah Parsons just fits that Belichick style of hybrid outside linebacker defensive end, whether it's the Dante Hightowers of the world or the Jamie Collins of the world. We've seen it time and time again through that scheme. And obviously that scheme has bled a little bit into Detroit with Matt Patricia no longer there, and Brian Flores down in Miami. But he just seems like that style of player, that style of defensive scheme fit. And, it's no secret. New England needs some help on the second level of the defense. They need some pass rush juice. And that's Micah Parsons to a T.
So I went same position. I went linebacker, and you alluded to that Steelers trade earlier where Pittsburgh trades up with Miami. They get Darrisaw. Well, when the Dolphins trade back at 24 overall, the original Steelers slot, they take Zaven Collins, the linebacker out of Tulsa. And Dane actually put it in the blurb in the mock draft. In terms of scheme fit, Collins in Brian Flores' defense is one of the most logical projections in this mock draft. And I agree. I think when you look at Collins, he fits that scheme like a glove because of all the different things that he can do, all the places that he can line up and affect the game. I think he's a really, really intriguing player. And to me, the style of scheme that best fits him, that best caters to his skill set, is from that kind of Belichick tree, and there's only a couple of those defenses now wandering around the NFL. You look at obviously New England with Bill Belichick, and then you look at Miami right now. Those are the only two, as far as I can remember, right off the top of my head, right? I don't think there's any other defenses that are purely running that style of scheme. So I'm looking at Miami. I'm looking at New England as the two best fits for Zaven Collins. Now, it doesn't mean that he can't fit anywhere else, but in terms of the team where I feel he could get that could get the most out of him, and where he will be valued, where he will be a prized addition most, those are the two schemes that make the most sense in my mind.
And Fran, let's just talk about it while we're here. That's Micah Parsons going 15th overall, Zaven Collins going 24th overall. Are these players this much closer than we may have thought earlier in the process? Micah Parsons, consensus top 5 pick, Zaven Collins, one of the risers and the darlings of the college football season. And suddenly, as we're getting closer to draft time in the mocks, these guys are finding themselves pretty close together on the board. And as we just talked through their scheme fit, their projection, kind of similar style outside linebacker, hybrid defensive ends that will probably get used in a similar fashion. Both like massive players, oversized linebackers, explosive athleticism in those oversized frames. They might be a lot closer than I think I may have given credit for.
Let me ask you a question, because I agree. I think they are close. In your mind, because you watch the NFL all year round, and you're studying the film, and we talk about players on a weekly basis on this show and on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. When you're looking at 3 down linebackers, and we've covered this on the Under the Hood segment during the season, what's more valuable in your mind? Is it a guy that on third down can be used as a rusher, or is it a guy on third down that can be a great coverage player? Still a 3-down player, but essentially it's like, do you want Fred Warner, Bobby Wagner, or do you want Anthony Barr? You know what I mean? Like, do you want the guy that on third down, we're going to be using him as part of our rush package, as Demario Davis, or it's going to be a 3-down guy that we know can play in space and not be a liability and really help our back 7?
And there's so many different ways to peel that back, because you could go the Devin White route, who became a great pass rusher this year. But it's almost like they learned on the fly last year. He wasn't great in coverage on third down. So it's putting him in better positions to be successful. I think the main thing is not asking squares to do round jobs and not thinking this linebacker can do everything for you. Find out what they do well, put them in a position to be successful, and don't ask them to, zig when you need somebody to zag. Find someone that zags if that's what you need. In the linebacker position is so interesting, because what they do on third down is a huge, projection tool. It's a huge, aspect of their role. It's a huge aspect of what type of player they're going to be at the next level. So finding that use on third down. Are you a blitzer? Are you a QB spy? Are you just a zone drop guy? Can you match up in man coverage? Can you do multiple things? And I think finding out what guys do well and don't do well is really the name of the game.
No doubt. And it's so important when you're trying to pick players for a mock draft, understanding what teams are looking for and how they fit in that projected system. Let's go to the next category here. Most outside the box picks. There's 2 ways you can kind of go with this. Either one where you're like, man, like no one's really talking about that, but that really makes sense. Or just maybe it doesn't quite make sense to you. Or like, man, I'm not sure what he's seeing here. I'll let you kind of take that for what you will. What's your most outside the box selection here?
Well, this one gave me, a little bit of the most head scratch going up and down the mock here. Not only for the player choice, but the fact they traded up for this player choice. And that's the Buffalo Bills coming up from the 30th spot to the 21st spot with a trade with the Indianapolis Colts to take big press corner J.C. Horn from South Carolina. Sean McDermott, primarily a zone scheme defense, loves some bigger, more physical corners. He certainly fits that profile. But I thought he had much more of a pedigree to be a press man, bump and run type of corner, which they don't really play a whole lot in Buffalo. So while he can be that force player for you, he's going to come up and run support, be a good tackler, be a good defensive player, not just a cover guy. I kind of thought there might be a round 2 or round 3 zone corner that may fit that scheme a little bit better. Whether that's maybe an Asante Samuel Jr. out of Florida State, who I just watched the other day, who I think is one of the most intriguing players in this class because he's undersized. He's not a great press man corner, but he's as good a zone corner as there is in this class. Sean McDermott might have a little bit of a relationship with Asante Samuel Sr. and know exactly what type of pedigree and type of player his son might be bringing. So where Asante Samuel goes in the pecking order right now, I'm not sure. I think second round is more than an appropriate ballpark. So the Bills to trade up to 21 to get a corner that I'm not so sure fits that scheme properly was one of the more head scratching ones on Dane's mock.
Interesting. I went with a connection that I was like, you know what? Like, I haven't seen this much, and maybe it's out there, and I just haven't seen it that often. But I loved Alabama quarterback Mac Jones going to the New Orleans Saints late in round 1. I think to me, that's a point and shoot system. They're already structured to fit a quarterback with that skill set. Where hey, drop back, grip it, and rip it. Let's go. I feel like that kind of caters to the way Mac Jones wants to play. He's a distributor. He's got great decision making, outstanding touch to all 3 areas. I think that he would make a lot of sense for the New Orleans Saints in that system. Now they got to go through all the other hoops in terms of off the field and everything like that. But, in terms of figuring out if he's their guy from a skill set standpoint, I could see the fit. I could see the marriage there, Mac Jones with New Orleans.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's going to mirror some Drew Brees like qualities and kind of keep the same structural system and philosophical offensive approach and not have to move the launch point too much, not work in quarterback runs, still keep the basic framework of the offense.
All right, let's go to our next one. Favorite connect the dots pick. And this was always my favorite category, is like trying to figure out where's the connection here, where whether it's a coaching staff with the college team that he comes from, or the GM always picking from this school or this kind of style of player. What was your favorite connect the dots pick here in this mock?
Well, I'm going to go with kind of a historical trend pick, and a pick that they made in the past that really worked out, and I think is what's going to make them aggressive to take a similar style of player in the first round this go around. And that's the Minnesota Vikings and Rick Spielman. A couple years ago, they took this raw kind of unknown edge rusher out of LSU, Danielle Hunter, here in the middle of the first round, taking Gregory Rousseau out of Miami. Both early entries coming out, as underclassmen, both kind of raw coming out of college, both long, explosive, lean, great movements, great athletes. But I think they're still kind of working their way through what type of player they're going to be at the next level, and still refining their technique, their game speed, their awareness, their FBI. But I think the projection and development of Danielle Hunter, since being that, what was he, a third round pick several years ago?
So, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, somewhere right in there, that middle of the draft. I think the way he's worked out, they can definitely project Rousseau into a similar, kind of trajectory. And Rousseau might even have more tools coming out and more positionally versatile, and maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit more explosive too. So I think that past, experience will give them a little bit more confidence to take another player that may not be fully developed yet.
Yeah, I mean, you look back to Mike Zimmer's past too. I mean, he in Cincinnati, who were some of the guys that he worked with? Carlos Dunlap, Michael Johnson, the kid from SMU whose name is
Marcus Hunt.
Marcus Hunt, thank you. Guys that were similar kinds of builds, right? Tall oak trees off the edge that have these long limbs and have that ability to kind of set the edge, but also turn the corner. I certainly Greg Rousseau fits that mind, or that mold there. If you guys haven't already at home heard the conversation we had on the Blueprint earlier this week here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, we had Arif Hassan on to talk about the Vikings. We talked about pass rushers and the kinds of players they typically trend towards. So look, the reason why we do this year is because I feel like these relationships, these little connect the dots, they're always important. But this year in this draft, with the lack of information and the uncertainty around all the different parts of the process from the fall all the way up through the spring, I feel like those relationships are going to be leaned on more than ever. And to me, you look at the Baltimore Ravens at the end of the first round, taking Jalen Mayfield from Michigan. It makes a lot of sense. John Harbaugh is going to get great information from his brother, Jim, on all these players that are coming from the Wolverines. And if Jim Harbaugh stands on the table for Jalen Mayfield, John Harbaugh is going to listen. He'll trust that opinion. So, whether or not it's good information or bad information, you're going to get the right information from these sources. I like the idea there of Jalen Mayfield going, to the Baltimore Ravens, and that comes on the heel of reports of Orlando Brown potentially requesting a trade. So the tackle fit certainly makes sense as well there for the Baltimore Ravens.
Did you have a positional preference on Mayfield? There's still some up in the air. I think he's kind of a similar next tier player to a Rashawn Slater. You put them side by side. They have very similar body types, that lower half bubble, more people movers, good quickness off the ball, both being projected kind of as inside offensive linemen at the moment. Wasn't sure if you had a preference on where you would like to play him.
I did feel like he could play a tackle. He's not a power player, and typically that's one of the things that people say, he'd be a good guard or a good center, is like if he's not a powerful people mover and more of just a stalemate player at the point of attack, that let's move him into guard. He's got he's got the tools to be able to survive inside. He's played left tackle and right tackle. We don't have confirmed measurements on him or anything yet, but I thought that he could play a tackle. I just think that, he's not necessarily like a blue chip player, like top half of round one, but a guy that you can develop. He's still so young. I mean, he's going to be a 21-year-old rookie. So I think Jalen Mayfield, a guy, I would still keep him at tackle based off what I've seen so far. All right, let's go to the next one here. There were a bunch of trades in this mock draft. One of my favorite parts about it, I believe there were 5 total trades. So let's get into a couple of them. What was your favorite trade from this mock draft?
Yeah, 5 trades, and I think 2 of them were by the Miami Dolphins.
Right.
So they were one of the more active teams. So let's go right after the Miami Dolphins here. First of all, moving from number 3 to 8, getting out of that spot, allowing the Carolina Panthers to come up and get a quarterback. And that means they are able to still get Devonta Smith, Heisman Trophy winner at 8. They then get Zaven Collins later in the draft. And then they come back in at the 13th hour for the 32nd overall pick, getting out of that spot, the Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Bucks. And then Miami gets Travis Etienne. So to walk out of that first round with 3 first-round players, Devonta Smith, Zaven Collins, Travis Etienne, I think that's an exciting haul of pretty proven players and guys that should be ready to go, right? First thing in 2021.
Yeah, I think that, it makes a lot of sense for them in terms of being a trade back partner for a team that's looking to move up to get a quarterback. And so the idea of, hey, we're going to trade out of 3, we're going to go all in with Tua, let's surround him with talent, but still pick up some more picks. And so you get that ammunition. Not only do you get Devonta Smith in the trade back, because he's in every mock draft going to the Dolphins right now at 3, but then you're also able to get more picks and get more players to surround Tua. So I think that that's a really smart move in terms of trading back there out of the top 5. For me, it was the team that partnered with the Dolphins to move up. I loved the Panthers' idea of trading up for a quarterback. You don't know how those quarterbacks are going to go off the board in the meat of that top 10. So be aggressive. We already know that there's all these reports that the Panthers were trying to be aggressive in terms of getting Matthew Stafford from the Detroit Lions. So I think when you know this is a team that's looking for their guy, go up and try and get Justin Fields. I've talked about it in the past. We want to try and connect the dots. Matt Rule was on the same staff as Ryan Day and myself at Temple back in 2006. And look, he's going to get that information, right? We just talked about that with the Harbaugh connection. You're always looking for those guys that are able to get the best information possible. Matt Rule has a relationship with Ryan Day. We know Ryan Day feels strongly about Justin Fields. If he gets that right info, hey, he's going to go up and make that move. So I do like that connection there with the Panthers moving up for Justin Fields.
Yeah, it's a great pick right there. And it's just a matter of who the Panthers are really coveting with that 3rd overall pick. And Dane's mock, you obviously have Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson going 1-2. Might not be settled yet who they would really covet at number 3 there, whether it's going to be Trey Lance, whether it's going to be a Justin Fields, whether it could be a Mac Jones for all we know, or something like that. I think this draft is going to have more than a few trades and more than a few surprising picks.
So let's get to our, like I said, there was a bunch of trades in here. So we talked about our favorite trades. Let's talk about our least favorite. What was the trade that kind of shocked you in terms of one team and what they did, whether it was moving up or moving back?
Well, Dane, this crafty one, he worked in a current player trade as well. Did you notice that one?
I did see that one.
Interesting. I love mixing this in there. You don't see this too often. Number 12, the Jets receiving the 12th overall pick, the Niners getting the 23rd pick, but the Niners also getting Sam Darnold in that trade. So I love the Niners addressing and upgrading that quarterback position, whether they keep Jimmy G or not. I think Sam Darnold in there is a really interesting fit, a guy that I would love to see in a play action boot scheme, good athleticism, good thrower on the move. But the interesting thing is what they did with that 23rd overall pick. And they took Kwity Paye out of Michigan, explosive edge rusher. But I just had more concerns on this roster. I like their defensive line with Bosa, with Kinlaw, Arik Armstead, D Ford's under contract for a couple more years. And then to readdress the defensive line. Go over to this offensive side of the ball, Fran. Kyle Shanahan, we know we want to run the ball. Do not neglect the offensive line. And on paper right now, and looking back on that 2020 season, I have major concerns on this offensive line. I think they need to keep adding resources to the O-line. The scheme works. The weapons work. Let's get the quarterback in here and Sam Darnold, but don't neglect the offensive line. I mean, right now they have Justin School, Weston Richburg, Laken Tomlinson, McGlinchey at right tackle, and not much after that. And a lot of those positions can be upgraded, whether you want to get a tackle to move in a guard, an interior lineman, somebody like that. I just thought there was more needs on the offensive side of the ball, particularly in the trenches.
Yeah, I think that's certainly an interesting pick, trying to figure it out. And plus, that is a wide 9 team to keep in mind when you look at that coaching staff and that defensive line coach. That he comes from that Jim Schwartz tree. So I don't know if Kwity Paye is quite that guy. I don't know if you would agree with that. I don't know if he's that guy off the edge that you're looking for typically in that system.
Listen, I think Kwity Paye is a great player. I'm going to be fine with him, I think, in any scheme, Fran.
Okay.
I think I could play him in 4-3. I could play him as a stand-up. I'll be fine with him. I'll figure it out. It's just a matter of where does he get drafted? What type of draft capital? What other needs are you maybe omitting to get him? I just think the Niners, in the way the NFL is going, the way the system has gone with Kyle Shanahan, you got to keep putting coals into the fire in the trenches there if you want it to be a foundational scheme through the run game.
My only beef was the Dolphins trading back up for a running back, whether it's ETN, whoever they would trading up for a running back, I think would be interesting. I know that everybody wants to try and get to a running back. Obviously, they need one. I'm not saying that they don't, but I would be surprised if they poured multiple assets into trading up for a back. I don't know if you feel differently about that.
Yeah, that's fair. But you have to also look at, like, they traded 36 to go to 32.
Sure.
What were they afraid of in those 5 picks? Were they afraid the Bucs were going to take that ETN? Could you maybe have gotten ETN at 36 there? And that's the cat and mouse of the draft, and trying to read these teams in front of you and making sure they don't take that guy you really covet. So if the Dolphins are all in on ETN, we have to go get this guy. We've seen that year after year after year, particularly the back end of round 1, and even to some of those early picks in round 2. Going to get that guy that they want.
Yeah, I think that's, and he actually alluded to that. He was saying, look, there's a bunch of teams the early part of round 2 that could, try and jump at ETN. So they went and got their guy, and even throwing in a little bit of info. He said the Dolphins are high on Travis Etienne. So something to keep an eye on here moving forward throughout the rest of the process. Last thing before we get this go, we went through 12 picks here or so, 12 selections. Let's go to one more. The Eagles selection at number 6. The Eagles take LSU wide receiver Jamar Chase. Here is the blurb here from Dane. He wrote, with the uncertainty of the organization's quarterback situation, the Eagles are another team that might be in the mix for a top 10 quarterback. But in this scenario, Howie Roseman and the front office decide to build up the roster, adding a 3-level threat like Jamar Chase, who can be a legitimate number 1 receiver in any offense. Chase is going to be, this is me speaking now, not Dane. Chase is going to be one of the more popular players mocked to the Eagles. We talked about it. That was in last week's mock draft that we did. I'm sure he will be mocked to the Eagles in a lot of mock drafts moving forward as well. I don't know, Ben, if we've got any other thoughts to add on the Jamar Chase fit here in Philadelphia.
I think he's going to fit in Philadelphia, like the city, the town, the offense, his style. This is a physical alpha type of receiver. And as much as we're excited about him, maybe beasting some smaller corners and making people miss after the catch, I see him really being the dog in the run game, the dog on the perimeter blocking, doing the dirty work stuff. And I think there's been a little bit of that missing in this offense for a couple of years. When you look at Sirianni, some of those skilled players from the Colts, what are some of those things we love? Just the toughness, the physicality. And believe me, they don't need to have the ball in their hands to show it. And I think that's something Jamar Chase has really done well at LSU, and one of the more physical, violent alpha receivers in the draft. I just think he's going to fit in. The fans are really going to like that style.
I think so. He's certainly one of my favorite players in this draft. A lot of really talented players in this class, and Chase certainly one of the guys at the top of this list. So for more on this mock draft, make sure you go check it out over at The Athletic. Dane always doing great work, and this mock draft, no different. Ben, this was fun. We'll be back with you early next week. Me, you, and Dane. We'll chop it up. We got Trevor Lawrence's pro day at the end of this week. We'll talk through that. We'll have plenty to hit on with you later next week on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
The Unofficial Visit.
Well, excited to be joined by former UCF corner Aaron Robinson. Aaron, thanks for joining me, man.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me.
So let's get into your on the field and get into your skill set. For fans who have not watched you play, give us a quick scouting report of what they can expect to see from you on the field.
Physical guy, physical DB for sure. Loves to put a hat on the ball, and versatile. That's pretty much it. Everything else speak for itself.
For somebody that had never seen you play, and you can go through your whole career and say, all right, there's one play that I want you to watch first. Like this was my favorite play. I always think of this, or you feel like best represents what you bring to the field. Is there one play in particular that you feel stands out above the rest?
Not really a specific play. If you want a game, I'd probably give you a game.
Sure.
Houston 2019, Temple, even Stanford. Those games are some pretty good games.
What was it that stood out about that game against Houston?
You know, pretty much taking on that best guy. You know, I had the opportunity to follow him, you know, pretty much the entire game, that 2019 season. And, you know, contributed a lot to that game to help my team come out with that win.
So we talked with your position coach, with Coach Martinez, a few weeks ago, and he talked about just your versatility, you know, how they were able to move you from inside to outside throughout the course of your career. What was that adjustment like? Give fans kind of insight into what it takes to make that move when you're an outside corner and now you're going to play, you know, that nickel, that star position on the inside.
Right. You know, pretty much having to mature and you know, wanting to take on that bigger role, you know, and with that comes, you know, a lot more communication and knowledge of the defense, of the game as well. And, you know, just pretty much want to take that bigger step and being mature to, you know, kind of take on that extra role to, you know, contribute to the defense and the team as well.
So you go down to the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama last month. What was that experience like? What did you get out of it? Take us through, you know, just what that whole process was like for you.
Yeah, it was pretty, you know, pretty exciting. You know, being able to compete with some of the best in the college football world and in the draft this year, and you know, being able to showcase those skills in front of the coaches and scouts. You know, also taking coaching from all angles, you know, to excel my game and you know, prepare me to be a better player on and off the field. You know, really just, you know, all the interviews and whatnot. It was pretty much a, you know, a solid, fun week and, you know, a pretty busy week and helping everyone that attended to you know, be better players on and off the field.
Who's the best receiver you faced that week in practice? You got to pick one guy. It was a good group overall. You had some good battles every day. Was there one guy in particular that stood out to you?
I'd probably say Trayvon Grimes. You know, one day we went at it. You know, even his former teammate Tony. You know, they both gave me some great work, but it was just that one day me and Trayvon Grimes was going at it in one-on-ones for the most part.
For fans that haven't seen Trayvon, what is it that he brings? How does his skill set differ from other receivers?
Yeah, man, you know, tall, rangy guy. You know, is going to work you at the line, give you different looks, and you know, physical as well. Pretty much it.
So he was the toughest guy you saw that week. Who was the toughest guy you feel like you saw this past season as a junior at UCF? Who was the guy that kind of, you know, gave you the best work on a Saturday this fall?
I'd probably say 4 from Memphis. Not sure what his name was, but for sure him this past season. You know, Marquez Stevenson from Houston. His game was cut short this past season, but you know, he was for sure the guy 2019 year. But for this past season, I'd probably say 4 from Memphis.
Marquez is fast, man. He's got legit speed. And I know you saw him a little bit, you know, at the Senior Bowl as well. You know, the receiver you were talking about before, Calvin Austin from Memphis, number 4. What was it about him that stood out to you this past season?
You know, really just giving me different looks at the line of scrimmage. You know, and whether it was you know, different releases or you know, getting in and out of his breaks. You know, with different route concepts and whatnot. You know, it definitely made it an exciting game for myself.
Take us through a week of preparation for you when you're getting ready to face an opponent. You're getting ready to face Memphis or Houston. What does that week look like for you in terms of your prep and your film study and things like that?
Right. You know, whatever day, you know, whatever day we're installing, you know, whether it's first, you know, second down, third down route concepts, you know, pin 10, you know, watching film, you're looking at splits, you're looking at receiver demeanor coming off the ball, run a pass, you're looking at formations, you know, personnel, you know, also situational football, sudden changes and whatnot, what route concepts you could be getting at. You know, I like to take notes, lots of notes, pen and paper, make sure my notes are up to date, have coaches look over them for me. And, you know, even watch extra film for my understanding with the coach. So when I am watching, extra 2 hours of film on my own, my notes and the film is making sense to me for me to understand the game plan going into that week. So a lot of film and one-on-one coaching.
What do you like most about film study? Do you like watching individual players, and you talked about like a guy's demeanor coming off the ball and body language, or do you like the kind of the X and O aspect of studying different route concepts and situational football of the opponent?
Right. I definitely love to be a student of the game and pay attention to different formations, personnel, route concepts I could be getting in certain situations. So you can never not want to study your defender, your opponent you're facing that week. So that plays a big role as well.
What was the toughest offense for you to prepare for on a weekly basis in the AAC?
I'd probably say any team that wanted to, spread us out and work us with different route concepts. You had Memphis, you had Houston, you also had Cincinnati. Just those different route concepts and different receivers bringing different things to the table.
Who do you feel was the leader of that defense this year for you guys?
Definitely me and Richie Grant, for sure. Definitely.
Richie is a guy that obviously earned a lot of accolades down there with you as well, down in Mobile. Give fans a look at it. What does he bring to the table from an on-field standpoint?
Right. He's another coach on the field. Besides Coach Martinez and Coach Bell, even Coach Shannon, he's on the field. Really just leading the defense, whether it's recognizing something we seen on film that could possibly be playing out, in the game, and really just reminding us what to be looking for and paying attention for. If someone's wrong, really just setting them up, getting everything together for a successful play.
Was there one specific play that you can kind of think back to your career over the last couple of years where you're like, man, like that's where Richie, just him being on top of everything from a mental standpoint and his being a coach on the field, where that really kind of came through?
For myself, I probably mentioned, whenever we had to face a team that wanted to spread us out and work us, with a certain route concept. I know me and Richie we got a lot of drive route concepts.
Yep.
Even bunch formations, recognizing those concepts and hearing him out there on the field, really reminding myself and maybe a corner or whoever else out there on the field with us that we could be getting this. So
who's the best player going back to UCF next year that we need to know about right now?
The best player overall? I'd probably say Jalen Robinson is definitely going to have another breakout year. He got his feet wet last season.
Yep.
First year getting back into it, but he had a phenomenal year. So I feel like he's going to take a bigger role and kind of excel and show what he has at stake.
Was there a moment where you saw him in practice and you were like, man, like, all right, like this kid's like, everything we heard about him is legit. Like this guy's the real deal.
Yeah, for sure. I loved competing in one-on-ones against him. Whether it was him working me on the outside or the inside. He's one of those guys that's definitely going to go 110. With wherever he's lining up or whoever he's competing against. And he definitely worked me and showed me that I had to stay on top of my game in practice and molded me into the player I am, helped mold me into the player I am today.
Is there a guy for UCF this year, coming up next year that, maybe we don't know about now, but a year from now, we're all going to know, a guy that's kind of taking that next step?
Yeah, man, for sure. I could mention a couple,
Sure, let's hear it.
Corey Thornton, for sure, Justin Hodges, Devontae Brown, those all, defensive freshmen that had to play last year and step up for us on the outside playing corner. And then, you also have on the offense, I'd probably say our running backs. You got Goody, you got Richardson back there. Those guys are definitely be trying to step up this year and help contribute to the team.
And then the last question I've got for Aaron, just what did you guys miss in Tay Gowan this year? Obviously he opted out, for reasons, obviously with everything going on with COVID-19. But for fans who have not seen Tay play, really talented player, what is it that he brings to the field and to help his future NFL team?
Right. Tay Gowan is one of those guys that's very passionate about the game, and he has his reasons on why he plays, his whys, and he's very passionate and willing to go out there and contribute best way he can. Also, like myself, be a student of the game and take coaching points from every angle to help himself be as successful as he could on the field. So definitely a player worth coaching and molding into a great one.
Well, Aaron, this has been great catching up with you. You've got a crazy next couple of months. Real quick, I guess, before we let you go, now that the Senior Bowl is in the rearview mirror, what's next for you? What's going on every single day in your pre-draft process now?
Right, man. Just taking the same approach day by day. Really just training. Whether it's for pro day or any just in general. Wanting to feed the body, make sure the body is healthy as possible. Just working hard, man, day in and day out. Being a student of the game on the board, watching more film, and really just learning how to be a pro off the field as well as on the field.
Well, man, it's going to be a crazy pre-draft process for you. Obviously, it's going to be a unique year for all you guys, just with everything going on around the world. But best of luck to you moving forward. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hope to talk to you soon, man.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
Well, hope you guys liked hearing there from Aaron Robinson. Great info. We covered a lot in that conversation. Aaron Robinson has been in some mock drafts. I know Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network had him in his first mock draft towards the end of round one. We'll see ultimately where he's kind of projected, but whether it's round one, round two, he's certainly going to be one of the first corners off the board here this spring. Let's get to a couple of questions from you guys. We're going to start things off with CMart923. He left a 5-star review and just left some kind words about the show and answering fan questions, and got to his question. He said, I wanted to ask you what you think about picking a wide receiver at number 6 and if that would be a mistake. I know the Eagles haven't particularly drafted well at the position, but so many productive wide receivers have come out of day 2 or even later in recent years. It seems like at corner, it's not only a higher value position, but also one that's harder to find elite talent. Also, the Eagles have wide receivers on the roster with some upside. You'd look at Travis Fulgham and Jalen Reagor and Hightower, Quez Watkins, but you'd argue that there are no promising outside corners to fill the hole opposite Darius Slay. Whether they make the pick at 6 or trade down, do you agree that corner is not only a bigger need, but also much harder to hit on outside of round 1? Chris, this is an awesome question, and it's one that a lot of smart people have really good debates about. When you talk about the value of a wide receiver versus the value of a corner, I think it is a layered conversation, because you almost have to, the way I almost look at it is kind of what you're saying, that the top end corner is harder to find than the top end wide receiver. But as you've moved further down, is a good number 2 receiver worth more than a good number 2 corner? Is a third receiver worth more than a third corner? I think that's where those conversations start to get even heavier. It's a really fun one. And look, I think you can make the argument either way, right? Because when you look at who the top corners are in the NFL, right now, large majority of them first-round picks, right? Jalen Ramsey, Tre'Davious White, Jair Alexander, Stephon Gilmore, Marlon Humphrey, Marshawn Lattimore, literally going down the list, Byron Jones, Patrick Peterson, Denzel Ward. You keep going. All these guys, for the most part, Kyle Fuller, first-round picks, right? But then you go over to wide receiver, and you say, okay, there's the elite players, the Julio Jones, the DeAndre Hopkins. Those guys were first-round picks. But then you go a little bit further than that. You start to peel it back a little bit. You go, DK Metcalf went end of round 2. Tyreek Hill went on day 3. Stephon Diggs went on day 3. Devontae Adams late day 2. Keenan Allen late day 2. Allen Robinson went on day 2. Adam Thielen went undrafted. I think that it's a very interesting conversation, and it's not a black and white thing, because there's obviously extenuating circumstances with all of these players. At the end of the day, it really comes down to how your team is currently built, how you want to play offense, because that's going to change things in terms of how you value the wide receiver position. Do you value guys that can make plays with the ball in their hands because we're going to get them the ball in space, or are you going to be more, hey, look, we're going to run a lot of isolation routes. We need you to get open. We need you to get from A to B at this point, so we need you to be crisp, getting off the line of scrimmage and getting separation at the top of routes. No matter which way you slice it, it's a great conversation. Obviously, I think it's time, and it's been proven over the last few years. Great offense typically will win out over great defense. Now, look at the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl was a little bit different, right? You look at the Bucs, that defensive line, what they were able to do against this Chiefs offensive line, that kind of changed the equation a little bit. And that's why football is my favorite sport. It's why it's a huge, huge passion of mine. And it's why I got into the field that I'm in, because it's such a fun discussion to be able to have on a consistent basis. And people are generating new opinions all the time on the subject. That being said, getting back to your initial question, if you're looking at let's just say the 2 or 3 top receivers in this draft, right? You look at Jamar Chase, you look at Devontae Smith, you look at Jalen Waddle, and then you look at 2 of the top corners. I think you look at Caleb Farley and Patrick Surtain Jr. All 5 of those guys are blue chip players. All 5 of those guys are great, great talents. They're just going to bring different things to the table. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It depends on how you want to play. And when you drop that guy into the formula that you've built into this locker room, now you've got to decide what's the impact they're going to have on your team. What's the value that Patrick Surtain has opposite? If you want to use the Eagles as an example, what does Patrick Surtain do next to Darius Slay? Does that make Darius Slay a better player? Because now it's not that people could just stay away from Darius Slay. Now you've got a top 5 pick or top 10 pick at the cornerback position opposite him. You look at the wide receiver position. How does that help the quarterback? How does that help the defense? How does that help the run game? I think it's a really fun conversation. I don't know if I'm quite ready at this point to be able to say, oh, yeah, this is exactly how I feel about it in terms of this specific draft class. But I love that. It's a great thought-provoking conversation, and I'm really glad that you asked it. It's a great, great question, Chris, and thanks so much. And I hope I was able to answer it to your liking. Let's get to one more here. D. Jansen22 left a 5-star review saying, always looking forward to the podcast. Was wondering if you could list the game-changing, team-changing blue-chip players in this draft and rate them as if you were making the board for best player available. Who's number 1 until you feel that there are great players, but maybe not game-changing picks? And I don't know that just because I'm a one-man scouting department, if you want to use that term, I don't know if I would use that term, but I know our friend Ben loves referring to me in that way. Look, I think when you look at all of these players, so much of it, when you start to looking at the talent aspect of it, that are the delineating factors, it has to do with the off-field, and that's the information we don't have. And so the way I'm looking at it, I can stack them any way I want. And, Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, Daniel Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, we go right down the list. All these guys can stack them any way we want. But at the end of the day, we don't have all of the information that teams have. And that's what ultimately is going to separate these players from, hey, this guy is a true impact player, to he's just a good player, he's a solid player, he's a below average player. The great quote that I've cited numerous times here on the show is that talent sets the floor and character sets the ceiling. I know that's been attributed to Bill Belichick. I don't know if he originated that or if he parroted that from somebody, but I love that quote. I think it's really, really applicable to every single year in the NFL draft. But I think when you're looking around at who are the blue chip players at every position, you look at the Russell Wilsons and the Aaron Rodgers and the DeAndre Hopkins and the Teron Armsteads and the Aaron Donalds and Joey Bosa's and Jalen Ramsey's. All these guys are fanatics in the way that they approach the game, the way that they attack preparation and attack practice and getting better during the offseason. A lot of that stuff we don't necessarily, especially at this stage, for me, there's so much time now from here until the draft. I want to get a better sense of what these guys are as people, how they do during the interview process, and that will kind of further, allow those opinions for myself to evolve. At this point, I don't know that I could sit here and say, "Yep, these are the best players, on the board," and say that with certainty. But I'll tell you that is the delineating factor for me in terms of who's got the ability to be a true NFL star. It's not just the ability, it's how they interview to try and prove themselves that, yeah, I'm going to put the work in to reach my ceiling. There are a lot of guys that we've talked about, like Jason Owe, right, from Penn State. This guy's got every trait in the book. He's got everything you want. Jamar Chase from the wide receiver from LSU, Penny Sewell from Oregon, right? You look at all these guys, all of them have great traits. but how do you reach that? How do you get the most out of those traits? That's what teams are trying to figure out is this guy going to put the work in to get the most out of his body, out of the tools that he is given? I think that's what teams ultimately are trying to find out, and that's what determines whether a guy works out or if he doesn't work out is going to be those intangibles. And so that's a long way for me to say that, number one, I can't quite answer that yet with certainty, and number two, it's tough for me to do at this stage. And it's really, but it's a fun conversation. It's a topic that I love covering, and it's one of my favorite parts about the entire pre-draft process. So great question there from both of you guys, from Chris and from D. Jansen. Hope you guys enjoyed this week's episodes here of the Journey to the Draft podcast. We covered a lot of guests here every single week here on the show. We've got 2 more episodes coming next week. A lot more analysis and reaction to everything going on. We've got Trevor Lawrence's quote-unquote pro day at the end of this week. We'll cover that early next week here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
In just over 3 years, Eagles Autism Foundation has raised millions of dollars for autism research and care. But this is about so much more than just fundraising. This is about making a transformational difference in the lives of those affected by autism. This is about bringing our community together. With inclusive, sensory-friendly events and accessible resources, we meet families where they need us most and where we can serve them best. Together, we're united in our mission to improve the lives of the autism community and to turn awareness into action. It's what we focus on every day in every way.